Hello again, everyone, and welcome to The Crusher. I'm your host, Josh Brewster, and I'm very happy to be joined today by a guy I've always liked by the name of Bill Whittle. I think you know him. And I was looking back real quickly. I was looking back at an interview I did with Bill. My God, it was 11 years ago. It was December of 12.
Wow.
I'm going to try to throw it back up. It's on YouTube. I'm going to try to link somehow, do something.
I'd love to see it.
We talked a lot about who Bill is, where he comes from, etc. So I'm going to try to do that. But Bill, thank you very much for joining me on The Crusher.
Well, my pleasure. It's been a long time. Been way overdue.
And I just want to let you know this fantastic backdrop, Bill. It's in case Rick James comes back from the dead. I want to be totally ready. Okay, so that's what that's about. All right.
Wow.
Now, Bill, before we roll into all this, a few years back, I ran into you, and you said something to me that's rather prophetic. I kind of knew it was coming, but you mentioned to me, you said, Josh, we've made a mistake by depending on all the social media. They're not censoring or restricting all the content. And I said, Bill, you're right, because I love watching your stuff, but I was getting it every couple of months. I used to get it like once a week. Then all of a sudden I'm barely seeing it at all. And so it's interesting because you've got BillWhittle.com now, and you've really taken things in-house and taken charge. I know you can't get away from social media, but you have taken charge, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there that I think is great. So why don't you tell me about BillWhittle.com?
Well, we rebuilt the website after quite a long time. It was getting pretty long in the tooth and a little dated. Just real quick though, the thing about the new BillWhittle.com website won't have any influence on YouTube. That is an algorithm, and I have 189,000 subscribers, and I put out a video and it's seen by 3,000 people. So what does that tell you? The entire idea of the subscriber is supposed to be, I like this guy's stuff, ding, hit the button. And then YouTube did this kind of backpedaling thing where they said, oh, well, if you want to get notifications, then you have to ring this little special bell. And it's like, well, that's why they hit the subscribe button in the first place, you morons. So it's something called shadow banning, Josh, and it's really effective because basically instead of completely silencing you or kicking you off the platform, they just keep turning your views down. And not only does that not give you any legal action against them, it's also extremely disheartening. It's just really, really rough.
Bill, let me jump in. I am even in the infancy of this show, I am shadow banned constantly. I can tell.
Cowards.
I will tell you something personal about me, but I want you to continue.
Okay.
I was in the NHL for almost 20 years.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I was a broadcaster for the NHL for almost 20 years.
I'll be darned.
Glazov gangs, and I did some politically, but my gig in the NHL ended last year, and it's fine, it's cool. So now I can let it rip. I don't care. I'm going to say whatever's on my mind. I don't have to make anybody happy, but I can tell when I post things, it's immediately objectionable. And just to let you know, since I don't give a flying fuck, I'm going to label everything I do explicit. So there you go.
Yep.
Exactly. But here, politics, as you mentioned, as Andrew Breitbart mentioned, politics is downstream of culture. And I know that it is very important to get beyond just books or just political speeches or political shows. And it's very important to get some material, get some projects out there that people can enjoy. Politics, non-politics, whatever it is. But you've got the old favorite, the Stratosphere Lounge.
Uh-huh. That's just a live show we do once a week.
Right angle, ephemera, things to come, story mechanics, Major Mace Mattingly. So
and the last man on the moon.
I'm going to shut up and you tell me all about it.
Well, let me just start by saying, connecting it to the last thing you said. We not only have to change the format so that it looks different, we have to change the format so much that people we have to be able to send out messages that people can't tell are from conservatives, which means you never say the word liberal or conservative, you never say Republican or Democrat. You give them something that looks and sounds like entertainment, but the message is in the story. That's how they corrupted this country. That's exactly how they corrupted it. It took them 50 years, but just to give you a quick example, I mean, Bonnie and Clyde is a fantastic film, at least it was for the day anyway. And it's made by Warren Beatty, who's an enormous left winger, and it glamorized and romanticized two of the most horrible murderers that ever walked this country. So that was like the birth of the anti-hero, and since then we've just seen ourselves become villains in our own mythology. The patriotic Americans who love this country, it doesn't matter what they look like, we've become the villains in our own country. So they did that not by saying all conservatives are bad. They did that by making the villain always being some rich old white guy who's got lots of money, and people make the connection. So my feeling is, if you have something that looks like, let's just say, conservative content, the people who need to hear it are going to either intentionally turn it off, or they're just going to bounce off of it. So I decided I wanted to do at least two things that would try to get around that and get the message to them, in a in, in a way that they didn't know they were getting a message. So let me talk about the other one first, because I love Mace Mattingly so much. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is a show called Story Mechanics. And because of my time doing what I'm doing, and it's been an enormous, it's not just an honor and a pleasure, it's just been just a drop dead gobsmacking surprise to be able to say that I'm friends with guys like John Voight and Gary Sinise and Mike Rowe and these kind of guys. So I've already asked them, they've already agreed to do a show that's an interview show about how films are made, but with these guys specifically, like about certain kind of archetypes. So, for example, John Voight's pretty outspoken about his politics, and if John is talking about his politics, then people who don't like his politics are going to bounce off of that message. But if I start talking to John about the topic I want to talk to him about, which is the heart of gold, John John has the ability to play characters who are so almost unlikable on the outside. They're gruff, and they do bad things. Like in Midnight Cowboy, he's a male prostitute, and in The Champ, he's a drunk who a gambler, but John has an inner sweetness to him that transcends all that. So if I start talking to John about the heart of gold, what I'm really doing is I'm really talking about what is it that makes a person a good person? What is it that makes somebody morally good? And by asking him how he achieves it, we get to talk about it. And all I want from our society is virtuous citizens. This country cannot function without virtuous citizenry. So that's kind of a way to get to the message without having to put on the suit and the stand in front of the green screen and all that Republican guy. So we've got a bunch of people already signed up for that. So we're going to kind of come at the morality aspect of it rather than the politics aspect, because as you well know, Josh, every time we talk politics with these masters of rhetoric, we lose. And every time we talk philosophy and morality, we win. So I kind of want to get us out of their battlefield and onto ours. But the one thing I'm most excited about is I've been doing 3D animation since, God, I guess 1992. I got a pirated copy of Autodesk software called 3D Studio, which cost I think $1,000 at the time when I was lucky to scrape together $20. I got this pirated copy, and it was almost like some kind of drug deal where I had to go to this guy's, I had to call from a phone booth, and he's looking out the window, and then I go to another address. So I come out of there with like 22 floppy disks. Honestly, 22 of them, just one after the other, installing this stuff. Anyway, lately I've been doing a lot of work in Unreal Engine, which is what most of the modern video games are done in. And for several years now, the level of realism has reached close enough to reality that I'm interested in it. I don't particularly like stylized characters or animation, but it gets better every day. And so, using the latest software on Unreal Engine 5, I'm able to do pretty realistic looking characters. And I decided that when I was looking at the things that we're seeing in our modern society, I thought, you know, my first my desire was to say, here's what all this looks like to me, a 64-year-old baby boomer. This is why I think all of this stuff sucks, and not just sucks, but just bad for the people involved. Then I realized it's just one cranky old guy, it's like Bill Whittle shakes his fist at clouds, that kind of thing. And so what I decided to do was I came up with a storyline about 4 astronauts that are still on the moon, and they've been on this secret moon base, and because they're from the Apollo era, they the entire idea is we get to look at 2024 through the eyes of 1966, and that gives us tremendous latitude. First of all, because they're
Wait,
animated
wait, wait, wait.
characters.
It takes place in '66.
No, it takes place in 2024.
Okay.
It's a modern day story, but these guys have been on the moon since 1966.
Okay. Hello. I got it.
They actually beat Neil Armstrong there, although
Okay.
Neil Armstrong actually flew the 66 mission, and then he went back and flew the 69th mission, just so I could keep him in first place where he belongs. But basically, what I've got is I've got these 4 guys who are steely-eyed missile men from the age when America could just do anything it wanted to,
Yep.
and they get to comment on modern day society. So I'll just give you the stock kind of little thumbnail. These guys are sitting outside of their moon base. It's a real retro looking moon base, and they got their chase lounge, and they got a TV set out there, big color console, with a screen that's maybe all of 36 inches or something like that. They're sitting there drinking beer on the moon in their spacesuits, and they're watching TV coming down from Earth, and they see the Dylan Mulvaney ad for Bud Light, and one of them just turns to the other and says, "See, that's what happens when let boys play with toy guns, man." And
So they go back to the moon and they don't go back to Earth because why the hell would you? Is that
well, they're on the moon because of they're as far as they're concerned, they're still on duty, they're still on their mission, but
okay?
because they're essentially in this little flask, their ethos hasn't changed. They're 1966 guys, and I've been so pleased with not only the video quality, but I acted out all the roles myself using AI voice changing software, so it sounds like 4 really completely different guys, and I
It
just
does
think it's
sound,
fun.
I was watching. It does sound like different people. That's all you, huh?
And it's so much fun because for me, it's one of the taglines for the series is it's always 1966 on the moon. These guys are building their own moon buggies and they're racing them. In 1/6 gravity, they're playing tag football out there on the lunar surface where a guy can throw a 2,000-yard pass, and I just find that to be fascinating. That the guys who are the astronauts on the moon are spending more time outdoors on the moon than Gen Zers are here on beautiful planet Earth. So it gave me a chance to talk about a lot of things that we're missing, and a lot of things that have disappeared and are under attack, and do it in a kind of a tongue-in-cheek sort of way that doesn't really make anybody angry, and makes fun of itself a lot too. So I'm just super super excited about that. And
Well,
as to say, I was an enormous Major Matt Mason kid when I was a little kid, but that's a copyrighted name, so we came up with Major Mace Mattingly.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. I am a total space geek. I became one in the last, I don't know, in my 40s and now into my 50s. I have watched everything I can get my hands on about Apollo and Gemini and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I've read every book. And what fascinates me, Bill, is the devil is in the details. If you stop and think about something, now you're a pilot, you're well acquainted with this, but I was a kid who grew up and I saw the moon landings. I remember, okay, they blasted off. We wait a couple of days. We watch them land on the
Mm-hmm.
moon, then we watch them splash down, and it's a great achievement. Now, when you get into the details of one of the things I always point to, Bill, is okay. You talked on my years ago when we talked. You talked about people had done this with slide rules. This
That's right.
wasn't done by computers. There's more computer power in this iPhone, probably 10 times more than there is
Easily,
in
yeah, more than there was in the entire nation in one phone. Yeah, absolutely.
exactly all the missions combined. So they calculated that when they went into lunar orbit, they had, when they got to the other side of the moon, whatever it was, at some point, they had to fire the thrusters for, I think it was 6 seconds. If they fired it for 7 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
they could have hurtled off into space, never to be found again. Who the hell calculated this? I mean, and it's one thing to calculate this, but when you have a guy in a
Yeah.
capsule, the shit
Well,
gets real, Bill.
when
And it's
when,
like,
when you
yeah,
hear the
don't
you hear,
fire for 7 seconds, fire for 6 seconds. That's
that's
crazy.
that's actually a pretty big error, a
It's the
1 second error.
it's the most dangerous thing ever done.
Well, when you hear the moon deniers saying we didn't have the computing power to do it, there was a computer on board the lunar module.
Yep.
Most of the computing power was on the ground, and the information was basically just beamed up to them. But the point that needs to be made here is that what the computer was doing was actually extremely simple. This is Newtonian mathematics. Isaac Newton in 1766 could have calculated what he needed to calculate to go to the moon in terms of the math. It's actually really simple math and very, very well understood. So the thing about the Apollo program was not so much that it was this incredible technological achievement. It was just that we decided to go. It's just that we decided to do it. And I grew up in a time when the future consisted of us being limited only by our imaginations, not by our technology, and certainly not by our politicians or the weenies who are determined to make sure nobody does anything fun. The idea that we would be stopped from doing things like having nuclear power plants, irrigating the Mojave Desert so you could grow rice there, because some long-haired green freak with studs in his nose has decided that he doesn't like it, so he's going to write a sternly worded letter to some government agency, and that's going to be the end of it. That was just inconceivable. And that's
Yep.
the kind of thing I really want to make fun of, actually.
Well, and also, by the way, I have to talk because I'm such a geek. My understanding is one of the many reasons that Aldrin was selected to go with Armstrong. He was a prickly character. He was
He
not a
was.
guy.
No.
But they say that if everything had gone to hell, he could look out the window and with a pencil and a slide rule probably, he could look at the stars and calculate the trajectory to get them to re-enter. And remember, if you don't re-enter properly, you go up like a piece of flash paper.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating to me.
They called Aldrin Dr. Rendezvous because of all the astronauts out there, all of these guys had superb mathematical skills, but Aldrin was off the charts with this.
Yep.
He could literally take a piece of paper, a pencil, and a slide rule and tell you exactly how long you needed to burn to the tenth of a second,
It's insane.
if you knew the mass of the spaceship. But all of these guys were, they were steely-eyed missile men, and there's a shortage of that today. Neil Armstrong estimated the chance of the successful of Apollo 11 after it was over, way after it was over. He said his personal estimate of the chance of it being successful, he thought it was 50-50.
You know, you know what I heard also was what's his name? Kranz. Gene Kranz said them returning alive, all three returning alive, is 35%.
On Apollo 13, yeah. Yeah. And so we just willed our way into it, We just decided to do it. And Gene Kranz's very famous line is "Failure's not an option." Don't come back to me with anything that says, "Hey, look, we can't do it, Gene." If on Apollo 13, they had these guys had to make they quite literally, the most overused word in the English language now, but quite literally, they had to make a square peg fit into a round hole, and they used socks and duct tape, and they found some cello wrapper, some cellophane from this, and they just didn't take it as a no. My favorite story, you get a kick out of this. My favorite story about Buzz Aldrin and about this entire attitude, this Apollo attitude, was many, many years after the moon landing, when he was a relatively old man. Buzz Aldrin got interviewed by this young woman, who was, just a pretty young thing. She's doing some report on something, doesn't really have any idea what's going on. But she's more of a modern product of our current age. So she had heard the story, which is true, that when they got back into the lunar module after their moonwalk, either Aldrin or Armstrong was swinging this bag of moon rocks around, and they smashed a button on the panel. And the panel button that they smashed was the button they had to push to launch the ascent stage to get off the moon. So they've got this broken button that doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
So this young lady says to Buzz Aldrin, she says, "So, oh my gosh, Mr. Aldrin, what were you thinking about that? I mean, when you saw that, were you thinking what your last words to your wife would be, or were you thinking about how you were going to end it? Were you thinking about you just depressurizing the capsule? Would you go for a long walk? Did you have a speech prepared for the country? I mean, what were you thinking about?" And Aldrin looks at her like she's from Mars or something. He says, "I was thinking about how to fix the goddamn button."
And what did he use? You remember what he used?
Yeah, he's a pen. You just poke the pen in there, worked perfectly. And
by the way, Bill, that's the thing. People forget you can't test launching back up off the moon.
No,
we're not in 1/6 gravity here. You can't test that.
We had nothing like the automation to do it. And there
You
was
need
no reason to do it. When people say that there were no flight complete, when people say there were no flight complete, let me try that one more time. When people say that there were no flight computers on the lunar module, they're out of their minds. There are two of the finest flight computers in the universe on the lunar module, and one of them was named Neil Armstrong, and the other one was named Buzz Aldrin. These guys were looking out the window. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were getting readouts of how fast and how high. They landed jet airplanes at, and the idea that this is somehow impossible is just impossible to small-minded people who kind of feel a sense of like insider knowledge, like, oh, I'm not one of those sheep that believe, that they actually landed on the moon, yeah, okay.
the litmus test for American stupidity, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't
that's right.
know how much more stupid you can get.
Flat Earth, you can go to flat Earth. That's
Flat
like
Earth
the
is
yeah,
true.
those are the
Holocaust, you
those are
got
the magna cum laudes of the denier crowd.
Holocaust denial,
Yep.
moon landing denial.
9/11 denial.
Okay, now we got to get into some weighty
Sure.
issues because I got Bill Whittle here, and this guy can talk about this for another 3 hours. He's a pilot. He's not only a pilot, but he's a theater major too, and I appreciate that. People underestimate theater majors, Bill. Theater majors know how to play any role,
Hmm.
get it done, and if you're going to fail, you're going to fail in front of an audience. And if a
Well,
pilot fails, he dies.
I'll
So
just say this about that. I'm a guy who lives in both of those. I live in the intersection of the engineering and the artistic Venn diagram. And having lived among both of those sets of people and enjoyed their company on both sides, I can tell you that I would rather hear an engineer sing a Broadway tune than drive over a bridge made by an actor. So that's how I'll look at these things.
yeah, thank you. All right, Bill, here we go. We got to dive into all
Sure.
kinds of serious stuff. I'll start with this because we were talking about science. I'm gonna move through a bunch of topics quickly, but I'm gonna start with this because you sparked my interest since you're a guy who understands gravity. I have a feeling, Bill, that I will be 50 years into the grave by the time that the Western man wakes up and realizes that, despite his good intentions, a lot of this green politics, this green stuff is a fantasy. And while I applaud your solar panels and your wind power, we need fossil fuels. You are out of your mind if you don't think we need fossil fuels. And I think that the Western man is deluding himself. But again, I will be decades into the grave by the time we realize what we've done. I don't know if you agree with me, but your
Well,
thoughts on
I do, and I remember thinking, it's just going to be so heartbreaking for Greta Lundberg when she dies of old age at 95 and everything is pretty much the same way as it is right now. That's just going to break her heart. Um, Look, I don't think there's any question that it's getting a little warmer. When I got here in '88, the snow in the mountains would start in November and go through April. Now you don't see any of it at all. But that's not what they're selling us. They're selling us catastrophic end of the earth. And they're telling us right now carbon dioxide is somewhere around 450 parts per million. And they're telling us if it gets to 455 parts per million, it's game over, and we might as well just bury ourselves right there. Now, here's where the thing is a fraud, because 80 million years ago, if you put a pin on the part of the Earth where Kansas is right now, 80 million years ago, that little pin, that flag would have been under about a mile of water, and up above it was a completely life-filled biosphere with thousands of species, and the carbon dioxide levels of the Earth 80 million years ago were 3,000 parts per million, not 400, not 450, 3,000 parts per million. That was a lot warmer then, but whose SUVs got it to 3,000 parts per million? And much more importantly, whose green initiatives got it back down from 3,000 parts per million? Because 80 million years ago, 3,000 parts per million. 80,000 years ago, that same flag is now under 2 miles of ice. Now carbon dioxide is 170 parts per million, and if it gets any lower than that, plants are going to die. So this idea that we're trying to stop climate change is fraud on its face. The climate has been changing constantly. If they want to make the case that we are seeing catastrophically quick changes in climate, they can do that, but no one is talking about anything like 1,000 parts per million, let alone 3,000. And if the Earth got to 3,000 parts per million carbon dioxide and was not only recovering, was in fact a lush tropical kind of practically a paradise, then they're just plain lying through their teeth. Now, they're lying through their teeth. Some of them are lying through their teeth because they genuinely believe their models, and 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 they think that the right thing to do is to exaggerate the threat to scare the stupid people into doing the right thing. And this is where they stop being scientists and start becoming political hacks. These people want to take a political agenda and put the imprimatur of science on it to give it that kind of, because science is very, very effective stuff. And they want to put like this big badge on it that says this is science when it's not science, it's politics. And it doesn't raise the politics. All it does is degrade the science. And they know better. Most of them know better. Um, I have not seen any evidence that I think there's I think there's considerable evidence that things are getting warmer, but I don't see any evidence that things are. Look, it's very simple. If the Earth did not have a negative feedback mechanism, we wouldn't be here. If the Earth didn't self-correct itself back to approximately this temperature, we wouldn't be here. When you have an asteroid impact that wipes out everything on Earth bigger than 5 pounds, and the Earth goes through, I don't know, it was 4 decades of winter without a single day of sunshine, and the Earth recovers from this, there has to be a feedback mechanism. And the best way to think of a feedback mechanism is to think like a shallow bowl, like a wok or something. So if you take a wok and you put a ball bearing on the top of the wok and you balance it there really, really carefully, you can get it there. But the slightest little perturbation, the tiniest little ting, and it just runs away, right? That's positive feedback loop. But if you turn the bowl upside down and you put the ball bearing in there and you give it a tap, it'll go up and then it'll come back down again. And then you knock it again, it'll go up, but it'll come back down again. And that's what the Earth's doing. It's constantly readjusting itself. When it gets hotter, there's more water vapor. When there's more water vapor, there's more clouds. Clouds are more reflective than oceans and land, which reflects more light back into space, which cools us down. And and this idea that these guys have these computer models that are predicting the end of the universe, they know they're wrong about that. That's the only question I want to ask these guys is, I'm not going to argue about the current date. I'm not going to argue about satellite. I'm not going to get into it. I would just like to say to them, if you're saying that the catastrophic end of the earth is coming at 450 parts per million carbon dioxide, how did we get to 3,000 parts per million 80 million years ago, and how did we get out of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to finish the thought, this idea of perfecting the universe is a hallmark of the left, and
That's right.
I cannot accept any debate, and the science is settled. That's a
Absolutely.
hallmark of a very dangerous left. We've bought into it. Good luck to everybody, and there you go. Bill, let's very well put, by the way. Let's move on here because today on the day, well, there's a lot to unpack here, but okay, today, $353 million verdict against Donald Trump. Right to fair trial. I don't know where he gets a fair trial. Okay, here's the deal. Bill Whittle, I'm going to throw something out there. If I'm full of shit, you tell me. I am very concerned that despite the fact that I know we were better off 4 years ago, and I would have no problem if Trump became the president again. I am wondering, honestly, whether Republicans and conservatives could be walking into a trap because Donald Trump cannot pull the center again. His personality, he's got a lot of baggage, etc. Had he not run, I think, and I'm not telling you to vote for Nikki Haley, but I'm just saying, I think somebody else would have crushed Joe Biden for the failure that he is, like a cockroach. And I think that the upcoming landslide bill upcoming in November would be such an evisceration. It would make Walter Mondale look like a winner.
Well,
It would make, and that's what I think. And
fair
I just
point.
wonder if you think we might be walking into a trap, and that this is a little too close for comfort.
I don't think it's a trap, and I
And
don't think
maybe
it's
wrong.
close. I
I
think
mean,
I think Trump is crushing Biden. I'll check that in a minute for you. I'll,
I
I'll,
hope you're right. I
I'll
pray
let
you
you know
do.
on an interesting source. But here's the thing, right? Um, I don't know anybody who's a Trump. I'm a Trump supporter, and I don't know a single Trump supporter who doesn't openly say that this guy's got a lot of issues, that there's a lot of things that we would like in a president that Donald Trump doesn't have, and that Donald Trump has a lot of things that we don't like in a president. In fact, he's kind of a thin-skinned egomaniac, but he's our thin-skinned egomaniac, and that's the thing that people love about Donald Trump. So the left continues to try to pull him down with legal problems, and I think they think, in fact, I know that they think that they're going to come up with something that's going to be so shocking to conservatives that they're going to go, "Oh my God, Donald Trump slept with a porn star. Oh my goodness gracious!" It's like we already know. We know this,
But what
and
about the center, Bill? What about the
well, the center. I will argue about him not being pulling or not being able to pull the center, but that's not the point. The point is the center has been pulled away. It's not been pulled by Donald Trump. The Biden and the progressives have pulled the rug out of the middle of the country. There is no middle of the country anymore, and so
okay?
people have to decide: do you want to be on the transgender team or do you want to be on Orange Man team? And most people are gonna have. I think they're going to come to this decision. Now, you were in the NHL, so you'll get a great kick out of this. Polls are polls, and I can buy a poll, and I can buy a poll and write questions in such a way as to very heavily skew the answer whichever way I want to, right? But betting pools are a different story because betting pools are when people put their own money on the line, and when you put your own money on the line, especially when it's a private thing and personal thing, you're not telling anybody. You can be a big old Trump hating leftist, but if you bet on him in private, that's a different story. So there's a lot of evidence that says that betting pools provide the most accurate prediction of what people are going to do. So let's just take a look at it as of today. Okay, so this is the election betting odds for the winner of the U.S. presidency 2024 in order. Donald Trump 50% chance, Biden 31% chance, Michelle Obama 6.3, Newsom 3.7, Harris 1.8, Kennedy 1.5, Haley 1.2. Everybody else is off the charts, and Trump's lead continues to grow. So, that's not proof of what's going to happen, but it is saying that there's a lot of stuff going on that isn't being reported because we all know who the media wants to win. So I look, right there are I could list certainly three without any hesitation and without much thought at all, 5 or 6 or 10 national name politicians who I think can make a better president of the United States than Donald Trump. But I don't know any of them that have that religious following that Trump has, and that religious following that Trump has is born of the idea that despite his many flaws, he does not belong to them. He is one of us. He's one, and there's the paradox, Josh. The reason he's one of us is because he's a multi-billionaire, and you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, what makes sense about it is he's not in politics for the money. He's not in politics for the influence. He's not trying to get rich off of Chinese or Ukrainian interests or whatever. It's an enormous pay cut for him, and I think most people realize that and understand that gives him a certain immunity from corruption. Now, if Joe Biden's worth $100 or $200 million, on the other hand, I know where Donald Trump got his money, right? He got it from real estate investment and he got it from casinos and all the rest of it.
All right,
But
yep.
but where does this Biden money come from? Since they're lives of public service, we're public service. We're all about public service. Okay, great. You make $400,000 a year as president, Joe. Where'd the rest of the 30 million or whatever come from?
51 CIA guys sign a letter that says that laptop is bullshit. And does this go right by the American people's eyes?
Well, of all the things that I'm seeing out there, the one thing that is the most disappointing, heartbreaking, and worrisome to me is the corruption of the justice system, and that starts with the fundamentally communist attorney generals that we've had, starting with Barack Obama and then with Joe Biden, and that's horrifying enough. But the idea that the FBI and the CIA would be conspiring to throw the election in favor of the Democrats means that this Washington bubble has become so impermeable that the whole thing's just got to go. If it were up to me, I, I wouldn't fire all of the field agents. I'd interview them, and I'd find the field agents that I thought had the most patriotic and freedom-loving ideas in the FBI and CIA. I'd promote them to key positions, and not only would I fire every general and admiral in the U.S. military, there are a few good ones in there, but why take chances? I would not only do that, I would abolish the Pentagon. I'd sell the Pentagon into a roller skating rink. I just sell it to whoever had the most money, and I would make these generals and admirals have their meetings at their bases around the country and around the world. Because once you get inside that fifth ring at the Pentagon, nobody brings you bad news. Everybody who's in that inner ring on the Pentagon wants to have the stars on their shoulders, and they will do anything to do it, including things like saying, "Well, we've got to make our, the greatest threat to our national security is global warming and our lack of tolerance for trans people." This is what they say verbatim. And if you're wearing a uniform and you say that, you are not a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marines of the United States, and you're done. If I had the power to do it, I would cashier all of them, and I'd give them a dishonorable discharge. If I could prove that they knowingly weakened the U.S. in order
Yeah.
to advance their careers, I'd give them at least that.
Well, look, there's a world of things we could get into here, but this is how I'm looking at things. Is I don't know when look. We're so trained to Democrats hate Republicans, Republicans hate Democrats. To me, Bill, this is America against the left. We used to be Tip O'Neill versus Ronald Reagan, Newt Gingrich versus Bill Clinton. We used to have some kind of normal big
Yeah,
government versus small government. Now we've got America, which I'll define as Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives
right.
against leftists.
Yeah,
And
progressives.
I don't know when people will wake up and realize that your Democratic Party, you have your enemy is internal. Most
Well,
liberals have more in common with conservatives than they think they do.
oh
This
yeah,
is
of
it's
course they do.
America's done, Bill.
I kind of call this the Rubik's cube effect, and you'll appreciate this as a sportscaster, right? So here we are, conservatives, and we're on Team Red, and we're supposed to hate the liberals on Team Blue, and they hate us, and it's just really ugly. But then you could take these two people, right? You take Mr. Super MAGA Republican guy and Mr. Biden forever liberal guy, except the Biden forever liberal guy probably wouldn't go to a sporting event, but you get the idea. You can get conservatives and liberals who put them in a stadium, and it's no longer conservatives and liberals anymore. Now it's Packers versus Bears fans, and the people who are around you, if you're a Packers fan, they're either conservative or liberal, but you don't know that and you don't care. Everybody's wearing the yellow and the green, and it's those goddamn Bear fans over there that need to be dealt with, and so this division is largely imposed upon us. But the reason there's so much division is because of the left. When you were talking about Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, in fact, all throughout the 50s and most of the history of this country after the Civil War was about, okay, so you're a Republican versus a Democrat. What do you don't agree on? Well, I think we should have a 7% tariff, and I think we should have a 3% tariff. And when you have politics confined to politics, you can get politics done. But it's the left that brought politics into education. It's the left that brought politics into the bedroom. It's the left that brought politics into the school classroom. It's the left that is telling you that you have to believe these things, and if you don't believe these things, you're canceled. And so it's no longer about what size government I want. Now it's about whether or not I want my daughter in the same locker room as a guy who said he feels like a girl that day. And
And,
that's why
and,
things are so that's why
and
things are so passionate now, is because these lunatics have used politics to enforce their worldview on people when we don't have any desire to enforce our worldview on anybody. I don't care what other people think. I just don't want them telling me what to do. But they can't handle that. They got to control everything and everybody. And if anybody disagrees with them, they've got to be dealt with.
all right, Bill, let's move on. It's interesting. Years ago, you and I touched on the border when the border was just merely a shit show.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
hadn't become a clusterfuck,
Yeah.
which later became an invasion, that later became something that's going to turn states from red to blue, which later became. Now, listen to this one, Bill. Somebody, I can't remember where I read this. If you took, we had like 20 million illegals at least before the latest invasion, which it is an invasion.
No question.
Okay, Bill, here it is. If you had a state that was comprised just of illegals, that state would be the second largest state in America, second only to where you and I are sitting, Gavin Newsom land, California. I want you to think about this madness, Bill. Oh, and all the millions of people who just came in, they've been here a year. Only takes 9 months to produce a baby. Once they start dropping babies, because of the way we read the Constitution, God knows why, they're
Right.
never going to get out. I don't see. This is insane. Bill, this is insane. And before I finish my thought, I'm very concerned. You can send them to New York. To me, you need to send them to all the liberal suburbs like Shaker Heights and Grosse
Yeah,
Pointe.
Beverly Hills and
Help send them
Westwood,
to help. And
Brentwood.
Bill, this is insane. And I think the only people who really get it are people who live in southern border states.
Well, I agree.
Those are my rantings. Do what you will with them.
Well, first of all, when Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis started shipping these people to the liberal sanctuary cities, and then they started screaming bloody murder, that was the smartest piece of political theater I've seen in 20 years. It was brilliant. You know,
Yes.
live up to your rhetoric, okay? And it's easy for you to say, "Oh, we should let everybody in," when you're 800 miles or 2,000 miles away from the border. So that's brilliant. There's no question it's an invasion. There's no question that we're going to be dealing with a lot of crime. I have a feeling. I have a feeling that these immigrants are not turning red states blue. I think they're turning blue states red. Because one thing you can say about illegal immigrants is they are not, and I've seen this we both live in California, so we have pretty good firsthand knowledge of this kind of thing. One of the things that illegal immigrants seem to have in common, and not surprisingly, is they don't really want anything to do with anything official. They don't want to deal with the cops. They don't want to deal with the courts. They don't want to deal with anything, because then they're exposed. As far as they're concerned, they just want to do what they want to do and stay under the radar. Now, your point about making babies and having them become automatic citizens is a good point, but that is also 18-year lead time before they can vote. So what I think is going to happen is that this issue is going to be resolved long before then. One of the reasons that Donald Trump is Donald Trump is he's got the guts to say, when I am elected, we're going to see the biggest mass deportation in the history of this country. And listen, there are people who are listening to this and hearing, "Oh, you xenophobe, oh, you hate-filled, bigot." My wife is Russian. My wife is, well, she was Russian. Now she's a U.S. citizen. So I had to spend 6 years of money, time, effort, and endless paperwork to get her to a temporary residence card, a permanent residence card, U.S. citizenship, and she had to work her tail off to do that. So I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-illegal immigrant, and it's not fair to my look. I've tried twice to get my stepdaughter into this country on a tourist visa. We've been declined twice over 7 years, and that hurts. And I'll tell you, the truth of it is, Josh, it wouldn't hurt nearly so much if I felt that she wasn't allowed in, because the United States borders are so incredibly secure that no one who has the slightest possibility of disappearing off the radar is going to be allowed in. But when you make a legal application for a tourist visa from a responsible professional photographer holding property in Russia, coming to visit the U.S. as a tourist, who has 2 U.S. citizen parents with spotless criminal records, and you turn that person down, what you want to do is you want to say, "Oh, okay, well then we'll just do what everybody else is doing." See, here's the problem, and we're rapidly approaching a real critical problem with this. The reason America has been so successful for so long is because for most of our existence, doing the right thing and doing the smart thing meant doing the same thing, and now these swine have inverted the legal system so much that now you have to make a choice between doing the right thing or doing the smart thing. Conservatives continue to do the right thing. But when you set up a society so that being virtuous makes you a chump,
Yeah.
not just an outcast, but a chump, where you
Being
don't
a
have any self-respect anymore, because
citizen, being a
yeah,
citizen, be
yeah,
a jump.
yeah, then you're like the guy who's in line, who's in the right lane on a freeway exit, and you're watching every single car that comes up from behind you cut in front of you, every single one of them, and you realize, I'm not moving, I'm not getting forward. Then you start saying to yourself, okay, well, if that's the new rules for getting off the freeway, then I guess I'm going to have to be a dick like the rest of these people, and there you go. Now you're in real trouble. So I don't think that this system that is inverted can last. Something that cannot last will not last. I think that's Glenn Reynolds' quote. But I I have a feeling that that the election in 2024 is going to be a big one. You know what a master what a master of the future I am. To say something like that. Um, if it turns out that they cheat their way into that one, then I think we really have to start asking serious questions about um, what states we want to take out of the union,
Okay.
because
Well,
we're predicated on the idea of being able to vote for our insect overlords, and if you convince enough Americans that that system no longer works, then we'll leave the system.
I'll tell you something, Bill. You look. I'm teaching my son the book 1984.
It's a
Uh,
classic.
I hadn't read it in 40 years, but the new speak of erasing the word illegal, using the
Hmm.
word migrant. This is the kind of crap that this is Orwellian talk now.
And the left,
I,
they're masters of this. They're masters of the rhetorical battle.
Bill, I know where you live. You know where I live. Go talk to any Iranians in your neighborhood who
Hmm.
came here legally. I mean, you have
Yep.
experience with your wife, but you talk to them about what they had to do. I know people had to sit in Rome for 6 months penniless, waiting for their visa. Let's cut the bullshit. All right, now speaking of moral inversion, Bill, and I'm gonna finish with this because I could go on and on and on. But
Okay.
there's a big case of moral inversion here, and it involves October 7th. Um, hey, folks, they didn't massacre these Jews because they voted for Benjamin Netanyahu, folks. They massacred Jews because they're Jews. And, the can of worms, Bill, in our universities, no surprise to me. I am absolutely disgusted by the world's response
Me
to.
too.
Look, Bob, I'm going to tell you something, Bill. Bob Dylan has a great lyric in a song called Neighborhood Bully. Um, it's a pro-Israel song, which is why you can't get it on YouTube because they've censored it. Came out in 1983 after a very courageous Israeli fighter pilot who, by the way, died on one of our shuttles. Okay, he bombed the
Ilya
Austrian
Ramon.
nuclear. What's that?
Ilya Ramon. He hit the Baghdadi nuclear reactor.
Jews are not supposed to fight back or have thick skin. They're supposed to lay down and die when their door is kicked in. Bob Dylan said
That's
it.
Bob Dylan, man.
Now, I just want you to talk about your reflections on the world after October 7th and what this all means, because in my book, I'll finish with this. I wrote a piece on Substack. One man's Hilton is another man's terror tunnel. Look what Gaza has chosen for itself. Your
Well,
thoughts, Bill, and have at it.
okay, so you started this by saying that Hamas did what they did because they like to kill Jews. Well, that's obviously true.
To
But
some,
but
it's obviously true.
but no, but it's obvious. But that's not why they did what they did. The reason that Hamas did what they did was Hamas had to do something that was so appalling, something that was so shockingly brutal, that Israel had to respond and had to respond hard. Hamas killed the Jews so that the Jews would then have to come into Gaza and clean out Hamas, and then then the world would use that as to say, "Oh, you nasty, horrible Jews! Look at the Palestinian genocide that you've launched." Well, it turns out that the Jews didn't launch any Palestinian genocide. It turned out that Hamas went into Israel to do something that Israel could not ignore. There's no proportional response to this. And by the way, proportional response is a certain formula for endless war and death. There's never been a stupider idea in the history of the world than proportional response. But they had to do something so appallingly brutal, so inhumanly cruel, that the Jewish nation had to say, we have got to respond to this. And so Hamas, let's be crystal clear about this. Hamas did this so that Israelis would kill Palestinians. That's
Mhm.
why Hamas did it. That's the goal. That's the entire objective of Hamas. Hamas is there to do things that are so repugnant that it creates a world where Israelis have to kill Palestinians or Arabs or whatever, and then the world can say, "Oh, you rotten, horrible Jews." Um, and so you've got a small group of people that know this. They're just plain evil. But the armies of people marching in the streets are just stupid. I mean, they're just stupid. They're not even necessarily evil. Although, to be honest with you, if I'm going to go out in the street and protest something, I feel like if you don't have any idea what that is, there's something evil about that. So you hear these college kids chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free." It's like, which river?
They don't know.
What sea?
They don't know.
Is it the Atlantic? No. It turns out it's the River Jordan, and it turns out it's the Mediterranean. You freaking idiots! And so they don't have any idea what they're saying. This generation has been raised to be able to do one thing and one thing only, and that is protest. It is the only thing they've been allowed to do that gives them status. It's the only thing they're allowed to compete at. It's the only skill set they have. They don't know how to fix anything. They don't know how to build anything. All they know how to do is protest things. And the thing that you have to keep remembering about Gen Z is, and this is not easy for me because it's just so easy for me to want to just hate their guts. But they didn't ask to be educated this way. They didn't design the system that put this nonsense into their head. And they're not the ones who should have stopped them. They are the product of this brainwashing. And of all the people that suffer because of this, it's Gen Z. I have never seen such unhappy young people in my life. I mean, they're just miserable. And if one of them accidentally has to be happy, then it's the job of everybody else to remind them that you can't be happy when all of this injustice is going on. But it's sickening. And I don't believe that people will continue to vote for this kind of thing. I think you can sum up what I expect and hope. I may be wrong, but what I expect and hope is going to happen in 2024 is your average Democratic voter, relatively sensible Democratic voter, the kind of person who would have agreed with Tip O'Neill over Ronald Reagan, right? Not destroy America, left-wing lunatics, like them. I think your Democratic voter is going to have to say, well, I'm a Democrat and I can't stand the Republicans and I can't stand Orange Man. But if I vote for the Democrats, that means that there's going to be a naked male in my daughter's locker room. And she's been working on the swim team for 6 years now. And I'm simply not going to allow that. So I think rather than them switching over to conservatives in mass droves, I think there'll be a significant amount of that. But I think mostly they'll just say, I'm not voting for this anymore. I'm just not voting for it. When the religious right was most active in Republican politics, this is before I got active in politics, they never controlled the Republican Party. They were a faction, but they never controlled them. But these lunatics do control the Democratic Party. And if it turned out that the Republican Party had a platform that said, as a Republican, we believe that the United States is a Christian nation and that everybody who is either not a Christian has to get the hell out of here, then I'm not a Republican anymore. And that's just the way it goes. But we aren't, so I am. And I think that that these policies have become so anti-human and so anti-reality that people have had enough of them. We're going to find out soon enough, I guess.
Bill Whittle, tremendous. It's been a tremendous honor to have you on the show, and I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure.
I look forward to doing stuff like this again.
Sure.
I just love your insights and your attitude. Everybody, go to billwhittle.com. I look at that stuff and I say, well, yeah, that's the stuff Bill's been talking about for a long time. And I've been an admirer of Bill for a long time. And Bill, I wish you all the best with all of those projects. And I know that, there's a lot of great entertainment there beyond politics. I'm looking forward to all of this.
We're going to beat these weenies. This country's not going down to a bunch of green-haired, nose-pierced weenies who cry because they can't open their granola packages. I'm not worried about them. We're going to kick their ass. Don't you worry. That's going to happen.
God, thank you, Bill. I needed that, and thank you for joining me on the Crusher today.
My pleasure.